Hello, everybody, and welcome to day 8 of 28 days to better chess tactics. So on day 8, we're in the second day of Discovered Attack. Tomorrow will be the final test, but today we're looking at a complicated or otherwise interesting position, and it's white to move if you want to pause the video now. I want you to keep in mind that we're not just looking to apply a theme, but we're also looking to apply a logical and clear thought process. That's the main focus of 28 Days to Master Level Chess Tactics. All right, so let's get into this position. You'll notice that otherwise the material is equal with, it looks like both sides having 2 rooks, 3 minor pieces, namely each side has 2 bishops as well, but what differs here is the activity of the queen, bishop, and rook on the king side. So it looks like black has an otherwise slightly passive position, although he tried to get some counterplay in the center and just give a good defense of his king. But you notice that this queen is here a little bit inactive and out of play, and you have this rook here and these 2 bishops in the center, but otherwise they're pretty cramped. And obviously you should notice first that this rook is threatening the queen. Now when you see a rook bearing down on the g-file against a black king, you should always look for ways to continue the attack. So it might look crazy in this position. There's no checks, but in terms of captures, there's queen takes rook, queen takes knight. There's also bishop takes or bishop to h6, and that gives you quite a few attacking options. So it would be most logical to look at something like bishop to h6, and if he takes your queen, then you could get a check, but there's no follow-up because the bishop will be facing this way. So you'd look at bishop takes f6, and obviously the first response would be rook takes queen. He'd snap up your queen, and maybe you'd shed a tear for it, but otherwise you just have to keep going. All right, so the next follow-up would be rook takes on g7 check. King goes over, and now there's a lot of contact between the pieces. So the bishop is actually covering the bishop on f6. You just took on f7. You do have a discovery, but there's no way to get to this e7 square and recapture the black queen back. So you have to look for other moves. So if you just take here, then the bishop will take. So surprisingly in this position, you do bishop takes rook on e5. And you're setting up now a discovery still. The next logical move by black would be to block it. And oh no, it looks like everything is all over. But you have to always keep pushing your calculations down to the last move. And the last move, namely, I mean calculating variations that are concrete, which is checks, captures, and threats. So rook takes e7, queen takes, and then you get another basic tactic at play with bishop to d6. The queen moves, you take the rook, queen takes. Now this is a very long combination that ends with rook takes d7. And now you can finally evaluate the position. It looked like you were going to go for rook takes g7 and a discovery with the bishop, but you actually had to keep pushing forward with concrete forcing moves. And you end up with a rook and 2 minor pieces, and it looks like you're up a pawn as well. So in this position, you would be quite easily winning, although I would say objectively, it looks like the queen can check here. You might have some trouble coordinating your pieces, so you need to make sure you can do that. But otherwise, this would be a 1 endgame. So this was a very interesting position I found because it looks like Discovered Attack can have many elements of different tactics. Because you're not just focusing on something like a double attack like a fork, you're also focusing on using different things like skewers and pins and decoy and deflection to actually get a discovery. Because notice here, the rook is on the g-file and the rook is threatening your queen, but you're actually using a pin and a discovery again after bishop takes, and actually after rook takes and rook takes g7, you notice this discovery has a lot of power, and it looks like that's kind of a cartwheel, I guess, where you just keep taking pieces. So that's kind of a pattern that you would evaluate in this position, but it's also a pattern that can lead you astray because you might say, okay, well, I can only take on f7, and then he takes, and then that just leads to a lost position. So always make sure that as much as you can rely on pattern recognition in chess, you always want to look for the forcing variations to the end of the line as far as you can see. And I'm just going over this example again to make it doubly clear. So after the king goes, you need to look at bishop takes rook, which does seem surprising. When I was solving this position, I thought really there's no other move except bishop takes on e5, and then obviously he can block, so that does seem crazy, and your attack is completely over because black is actually threatening both your bishop and your rook because the king is going to take the rook on next move if you move the bishop. So you can see that a lot of these positions, so rook takes, you would just look one more move and then you'd say, okay, well actually I can get a skewer attacking the bishop or attacking the queen with the bishop and then taking here. And then after he takes the rook, which he would be forced to do, you take the bishop, and then you can finally evaluate. So that's why I was talking in the past videos about keeping an open kind of child's mind while you're going through your calculations, not relying too heavily on pattern recognition, especially in the early phase or during your calculations, and then trying to reach a final evaluation. So this wraps up day 8 of 28 Days to Better Chess Tactics. I'll see you tomorrow in day 9.
Don't fret if you got the solution wrong. There will be another time.